Coming up today, Korea's economic growth hits a 5-year high in the third quarter as tax cuts spur spending in stores. It could have been even better if it wasn't for the country's weak exports. More than 250 South Koreans who will take part in the second round of war-separated reunions gather near the border with North Korea. The 3-day event starts on Saturday. First, South Korea celebrates 70 years of its Navy with a fleet review in the southern city of Busan. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 23rd of October. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start with some welcome news for the Korean economy. The central bank says Korea's third quarter GDP growth hit a 5-year high as domestic demand offset sluggish exports. Shin Se-min starts us off.
Korea's economy grew 1.2% on quarter in the July to September period. That's the highest growth rate since the second quarter of 2010 and the first time in 6 quarters for the rate to top 1%. On-year GDP growth was up 2.6%. In the second quarter of this year, Korea's GDP edged up a mere 0.3% on quarter as the outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome, a bad drought, and slow exports dragged on the economy. The Bank of Korea says its preliminary data is slightly higher than the 1.1% growth BOK Governor Lee Ji-yeol projected earlier this month. The central bank attributed the solid third quarter growth to an increase in domestic spending. Government spending also picked up sharply in the July to September period, jumping nearly 2% on quarter.
Government efforts to spur spending, like cutting consumption tax, had a positive effect on the third quarter figures.
Investment in the construction sector spiked 4.5% thanks to increased demand for new buildings. It isn't all rosy, though. Exports, a key driver of Korea's growth, were down 0.2% on quarter. The latest figures come a little over a week after the Bank of Korea cut its 2015 growth outlook to 2.7%, 0.1 percentage point weaker than previously forecast. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, the heated debate continues at the National Assembly over the government's recent decision to reintroduce a state-authored history textbook at the nation's secondary schools. Lawmakers wanting answers have their chance today as the Presidential Office of Cheong Wa Dae is undergoing its annual parliamentary audit on this Friday. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has been grilling officials from the top office, including Presidential Chief of Staff Lee Byung-gi. Lawmakers have also been trying to determine how Seoul failed to receive 4 core technology transfers from the United States needed for the development of its indigenous fighter jet program codenamed KFX. Some are demanding Presidential Security Advisor Kim Kwan-jin, who was Defense Minister at the time of the request, take full responsibility over the matter. The first round of family reunions between South and North Koreans separated by the Korean War more than 6 decades ago wrapped up on Thursday, but preparations have begun for the second round. That will begin on Saturday. Our Gwon-soa is standing by in Sokcho. This is the meeting place for the families from the South. Now, Soa, we hear the participants have already begun to arrive.
Right, Mark, in big anticipation because it is the first time for these families to see each other in more than 60 years. That's why many can't wait for this reunions to really finally kick off. And that's why a lot of these families already arrived in the early hours here in Sokcho, and many of them have huge luggages with them. Of course, these suitcases don't really look appropriate for a 3-day trip, as those are packed with gifts for their loved ones. And I talked to one of those families, so let's take a look.
저한테는 작은 아버지고요. 아버지 동생분들인데 동생분들이 6분 계신데 절반은 세 분 살아계시고 두 분 나오신 분이 있어요. 또 의약품들이 좀 부족한 것 같고 그리고 또 생활 필수품 위주로 그렇게 준비를 했어요.
Now, what was a very big surprise for this family was that when the father of the family checked his name on the list, he saw one of his acquaintances on the same list who will even be with him on the same bus tomorrow. I mean, what are the odds for that to happen?
Yeah, it's a remarkable coincidence given how many tens of thousands of Koreans are looking for a chance to go to this reunion event. We also hear, Soa, that there's going to be a slight difference between this second set of reunions and the first that finished yesterday. Is that right?
That's right, Mark. Well, in the first round, it were the North Koreans that applied to see their South Korean family members, and this time it's the other way around. Now, a total of 255 South Koreans from 90 families are going to meet with their North Korean family members, with 188 of them to be exact. Now, the schedule will be identical to the first round that was held from the 20th to 22nd. For the South Koreans, this means it begins with a pre-session taking place right here at the Hanwha Resort, where they will spend the eve of the meeting day after going through medical checkups and a session on the meeting. Now, tomorrow through Monday, the families from the two Koreas will meet on the North Korean side at Mount Kumgang Resort for a total of 12 hours. So they will have to make the best during those 12 short hours. Now, this has been Kwon So-ah reporting live from Sokcho Hanwha Resort.
Well, thank you very much, Soa, for that report. Now we're going to connect to our Unification Ministry correspondent, Song Jisun. She was at the Mount Kumgang Resort in North Korea during the first round of reunions. We're glad to have you back, Jisun. And we've been watching the emotionally charged scenes on TV here in South Korea over the past few days. But what was it like to be there and see it firsthand?
Good afternoon, Mark. Indeed, very emotional scenes here, and it's good to be back home with all participants returned to South safe and sound as the first round of reunions took place as scheduled. Now, families cried tears of joy catching up with their long-lost loved ones. And interestingly enough, when asked by their family from the South about the past 6 decades, North Korean participants were very positive about their government, although some seemed to be aware of the North Korean officials at the venue while they were speaking. I've also noticed that the people from the North had smaller physiques compared to South Koreans. And no North Korean participant was aged over 90, while there were quite a few from the South. Many were also wearing identical brand new outfits that were likely provided by the North Korean authorities for this particular event.
And Jisun, how about the actual organization of this event? From what we could see from the video we've been getting, it seemed like it ran pretty smoothly.
Well, although the event itself went smooth, there were some issues. For example, upon crossing the border on Tuesday, North Korean officials screened all laptop computers of the 29 South Korean journalists and tablet PCs of participating families, which was delaying immigration that day for hours. Now, transporting video footage shot by broadcast journalists was also delayed, with the North Korean border office stopping the delegation on that first day. During the reunion sessions, I was also interrupted by North Korean staff many times while trying to interview the families, with their saying, "Do not disturb the quality family time." But overall, participants from the two Koreas were happy with the reunions, with many of them saying they were just grateful for this opportunity of a lifetime. North Korean officials I've talked to also had very high hopes of resuming the tour program at Mount Kumgang. Back to you, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Jisun, and welcome back to Seoul. That was our Song Jisun reporting on her experiences during the first round of reunions for war-separated families, and we'll continue to have extensive reports on the second round of reunions. Now, in other news, the United States is reviewing whether to put North Korea back on its list of state sponsors of terrorism. U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Policy Sung Kim made the remark in a written statement submitted to a terrorism subcommittee hearing of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee on Thursday local time. Kim said Washington is reviewing the available intelligence to determine whether North Korea is subject to additional measures, including designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. North Korea was put on the U.S. terrorism list for the 1987 mid-air bombing of a Korean Air flight that killed 115 people. Former US President George W. Bush removed Pyongyang from the list in 2008 in exchange for progress in denuclearization talks. The United Nations says there has been no change in the dire human rights situation in North Korea over the past 12 months. The UN's latest human rights status report, submitted to the General Assembly on Thursday, said torture and inhumane treatment was still commonplace in North Korea. It also says there is still arbitrary detention, discrimination, no freedom of expression or movement, and enforced disappearances. The report urges the international community to do more to pressure Pyongyang over its grave human rights issues. Now, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of South Korea's Navy. A fleet review has been held in the southern port city of Busan to celebrate the occasion. Our Kim Hyun-bin was there and he filed this report.
In a line formation, several warships take aim and fire. Bullseye. Anti-submarine helicopters shoot off missiles after detecting an enemy submarine. It isn't real world, but it's part of the South Korean Navy's special exercises to mark its 70th anniversary. More than 24 warships and aircraft take part in the live firing exercises and training drills held off Korea's southern coast.
We invited many citizens to our naval review. We conducted several naval training drills, including anti-submarine and special operations. With the support from citizens, our Navy will do everything to defend our maritime sovereignty.
Spectators are impressed and show their appreciation by cheering and clapping.
I brought my family here. I saw our country's naval power firsthand, and as a South Korean citizen, I feel safe thanks to them.
Watching the exercise, I feel good, and I'm so proud of our Navy sons.
This is the South Korean Navy's third fleet review. It has been held every 10 years since 1995.
The Naval Review is aimed at showing Korea's naval readiness and to assure the public that the Navy is ready to protect the country's seas. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Busan.
Now, staying on a maritime theme, Korean shipbuilders secured the top 5 spots as the world's largest shipbuilders by order backlog, despite suffering record losses this year. According to global researcher Clarkson Research Services, Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering had the largest order backlog of 8.5 million compensated gross tons at the end of September, maintaining its #1 position for 11 consecutive months. Daewoo Shipbuilding was followed by local rivals Hyundai Heavy Industries, Samsung Heavy Industries and other Hyundai affiliates. Now, Korean shipbuilders suffered huge losses this year. This is due mainly to increased costs from the delivery of low-priced ships and a delay in the construction of some offshore facilities. They are being closely tracked, followed by Chinese and Japanese rivals, which outpaced Korean shipyards in terms of new orders in the third quarter. Now, we all like to be greeted with a smile when we enter a store or a cheerful voice when we phone a call centre. But have you ever wondered about the emotional stress this can place on workers who have to work long, stress-filled hours? A recent survey shows this is a real issue here in Korea, and there are growing calls on businesses to do more to protect their employees. Oh Se-young reports.
Service with a smile is a daily task for Cheong Jisun, a nail artist working in Seoul. Regardless of how she feels that day, chatting with her clients with a cheerful expression is part of her job description.
I make an effort to keep talking to my customers and keep them happy, but it can be difficult when I'm tired.
A recent survey showed that nail art is one of the most emotionally draining jobs in Korea. It involves intensive emotional labor, which requires staff to regulate their emotions. This applies to most service-related workers, which include hotel managers, airline agents and career consultants. And at the top of the list are telemarketing staff, who go through countless calls on a daily basis.
Stress took over my life. I had to deal with swearing, sexual remarks, and even insults about my parents.
Despite such grueling conditions, most service companies fail to protect or compensate their workers.
Companies in the service industry compete in customer care, so the customer-first policy puts workers in an inferior position, vulnerable to emotional abuse.
To address this situation, lawmakers have tabled a bill to protect the rights of workers under emotional labor. The Labour Ministry is also working on various protection measures.
To prevent high emotional stress, the ministry's running consumer campaigns as well as counseling and consulting sessions.
Experts say emotional labour must be legally recognised as an occupational hazard to ensure companies improve their working conditions and provide employee benefits such as counselling. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Well, those are the stories we have for you on this Friday lunchtime here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website arirang.com/news. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.